recently there was a shocking report that stated that Nigeria has been ranked second globally among countries with the lowest cost of living, and that's according to NUMBEO's Cost of Living Ranking 2024. Now, NUMBEO is the world's largest cost of living database. The cost of living is the amount of money needed to sustain a certain comfort level in a location. And the cost of living covers basics such as housing, groceries, taxes, and healthcare. Now, Pakistan was ranked as the country with the lowest cost of living, while Nigeria and Libya came second and third, respectively. India, Afghanistan, and Kenya were ranked 4th, 5th, and 6th, respectively. At the bottom are Switzerland and Bermuda, which are ranked as the most expensive countries with the highest cost of living. This is quite interesting that Nigeria, despite all the challenges we seem to be facing, we are still ranked as second place when it comes to the lowest cost of living. Now, thank you very much, Gbolahan, for joining us to discuss this topic. Good morning to you, Gbolahan. Kindly unmute your mic so we can hear you in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, given the economic, of course, this report comes as a shock because, you know, given the economic challenges that countries face. Now, can you give us your initial reaction to this ranking? What do you think about it?
Well, I think it mirrors exactly the reality of the situation, especially once you try to, you know, put all the countries that are ranked on a single currency. If you do that, what you will find out is that it is actually very cheap to live in Nigeria. Anybody who lives in Lagos and just make a cross to Accra will perfectly understand what I'm saying. The cost of living in most of those other places is way, way, way above Nigeria. That is, I still remember the shock I had when I had to rent a house for the first time in the US. The amount I was paying for a 2-bedroom apartment in Lagos was what I paid for a studio. What I was paying in a year in Nigeria for a 2-bedroom apartment was what I paid for a month for a studio apartment in the US. So these things are there once you decide to convert to denominate everybody on the same currency. The cost of living in Nigeria becomes very cheap. As a matter of fact, even in the space of healthcare, I'm reliably informed that people are coming to Nigeria to come and get certain procedures done because the cost of doing the same procedure outside of the country is unbelievable. It's totally, totally unaffordable. A middle-class person in Nigeria can see a dentist. He can go see his ENT doctor. You try that in the UK and see what you will cough out to obtain all those services. So in terms of cost of living, it might not be out of place that report is actually correct.
Well, the report mentions essentials like housing, groceries, taxes, and health care. Now, can you elaborate on the specific areas where Nigeria's cost of living is significantly lower than other countries? Because, I mean, we understand that these prices vary from location to location. So how did they come about this ranking?
Exactly what I was trying to explain. Once you change the currency to the same basis and you say, all these costs, can we express all of them in dollars? If we express all of them in dollars, you don't even need to go very far. Just go to Ghana near you here. And you begin to find out that the cost of even Coca-Cola in Nigeria is cheaper than Coca-Cola in Ghana. A tuber of yam in Nigeria is cheaper than a tuber of yam in Ghana. Not to talk of when you now cross to Europe and you see what you really cost of living. The cost of your electricity, if you convert it, I've already expressed that common denominator is necessary for this report to make sense at all. So you take your electricity costs in the UK, for example, or all the other costs, even transportation costs in the UK. Those things are much more expensive than what we pay in Nigeria when you denominate everything in a common currency. You talk about food, talk about transport, talk about housing. I use an example of the house where I lived when I lived in the US. The amount I was paying for 1 year for a 2-bedroom in Anthony Village in Lagos then was what I was paying for a studio apartment for a month in Houston. So these are the way these things are. But you see where the flaw begins to come in is that you also now need to talk about how much do people earn in those societies. What are the safety net that has been provided by the government in those societies? By the time you start to factor all those things in, the complexion of the report might begin to change. But if you're just basing it strictly on the cost expressed as a common currency, Nigeria becomes a very cheap place to live in. Even the fuel that is very expensive now, when you take a cost in euro and you convert it, you will be amazed at what you will find.
All right. Now, some experts have questioned NUMBEO's methodology, in bringing about this results, and they've argued that it relies heavily on the user's submitted data and all of that, that may not entirely represent the society. Now, what are your thoughts on the validity of this ranking? And, are there alternative assessments to Nigeria's cost of living you suggest, should be considered?
I think a more comprehensive assessment would be better. An assessment that considers things like the minimum wage, what people earn and their capacity to earn, that considers the infrastructure environment, and the general standard of living. The standard of living is different from the cost of living. So if we factor in all these other costs, the safety net that has been provided by the government, all those things are important context to have a more robust analysis. But if we single out just the cost of living and we start to use a common currency, say the dollar, to express it, what that report says is what we're going to get. It will show that it is cheaper to live in Nigeria than to live in Ghana or in UK or Germany or America. That is what we're going to get. So for me, the results of that particular report has isolated only the cost of living, and if you do that, it may not be comprehensive enough to make other judgments. So the context is important. And unless we factor in all those other things, we won't have a report that is robust enough to speak to certain gaps and challenges that are within the country.
All right. Now, while a low cost of living might sound appealing, it often reflects underlying economic challenges. Now, how does this ranking align with other available data about Nigeria's economic performance, such as GDP growth, unemployment rate, and even poverty level?
Yeah, you see, by the time you go and look at those countries that are ranked close to us. So you see Pakistan is number one. What is there to envy about Pakistan economy? You even see countries like Afghanistan, which other one, close to where we are. So what that is saying is that maybe because the disposable income is very low in those environments, even India is there, if disposable income is low, whatever you produce, you have to price it within the context of the ability of the consumers to buy. Otherwise, then you will not be able to sell what you're producing. So the costs dovetails down all the way to the producers, such that they produce only what there can be an effective demand for. So the cost of living is not just about what it costs to buy things. It's also a function of the capacity of the demand of the consumers to consume those things. If they cannot consume it, then if you price it above their capacity to consume, you'll be out of the market. So some of these things, there are complex interplays that are out there. part of what I've pointed attention to now, which is to ask ourselves, what are the countries that have been, put close to us in that ranking? Are those the countries we want to be like? Who wants to be like Pakistan? Or are we setting our target on a country like Afghanistan? Or, we are looking further up. Therefore, we must look at all the other interconnected rankings or activities, not just isolate the low cost of living. But what does low cost of living mean anyway?
Of course, Nigeria is not prone to some of the disasters some of these countries experience. Now, comparing the cost of living across countries, this can be a complex, activity. But how does Nigeria's ranking compare to its regional neighbors, and what factors might very well explain these differences?
The cost of living in most of our neighboring countries is actually higher. A very good example that I am aware of, because I used to go to Ghana in time past. The one I'm aware of is Ghana. When you leave Lagos and you go to Accra, the cost of living in Accra will embarrass you. We're starting from rent to the cost of a tuber of yam, to the cost of a bottle of Coke, will actually shock a lot of Nigerians to know that the cost of living is much higher in some of our neighboring countries. Okay, for us as a people, we now need to begin to interpret this data or this report within the context of so many things. Otherwise, there are people who might even start rejoicing that we have a low cost of living. Yes, you might tell yourself, yeah, maybe there's a cost to rejoice somewhere there. I don't know, but I think we should shift attention to actually the standard of living and not just the cost of living. Standard of living is a bit more comprehensive. It talks about the education, it talks about healthcare, it speaks about infrastructure and the environment. Everything in totality is what the standard of living will speak to. And if we today have a report on standard of living, I am not so sure about how high ranking a country like Nigeria will be.
All right. Considering our exchange rates, wouldn't it be said that this ranking is based on the fact that our currency has depreciated greatly? So they are comparing it to the official or the currency used globally, which is the dollar. Now, compared to the dollar, our naira would seem, quite minute. Now, do you think that's the perspective they are coming from? Or are they, where are they supposed to actually come to Nigeria and see the standard of living in the country before bringing about this report?
Well, like I said, the report has focused on cost of living and not standard of living. And one of the assumptions that this is based upon is that you have to do a conversion to a common currency. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to start comparing oranges with apple. By the time you convert everything to a dollar, I mean, you're also looking at several other countries, not just the naira. That is when you can say, oh, an apple for an apple is 1 naira here, it is 90 kobo in that other place. So it is cheaper where it is 90 kobo. What you're saying, you can even glean it when you look at Nigerian Stock Exchange, for example. In today's naira terms or dollar terms, you'll be surprised that there are no more than 2 stocks on the exchange that are up to $1. I know Seplat is more than $1 and probably Airtel. All the other stocks are less than $1. So it's the same thing. Someone who has, say, 1,000 naira in Nigeria today, even in Lagos, can eat. But 1,000 naira in America is less than $1. So if you take less than $1 and walk into an eating place, can you eat in America? Can you eat in UK? Those are what cost of living will project to you. And the truth, when you look at those things, it will appear as if there's nothing. I think the report, as far as low cost of living is concerned, is okay. Once you denominate the currency across, make it only one currency, which is the dollar. even when if this had been done, even 10 years ago, when dollar was not this bad, or even 20 years ago, when I lived in the US, I left the US in 2006. So that is about 17 years ago. 17 years ago was when I was telling you that the cost of the place I left in Lagos and the one I took in Houston were wide apart. That was 17 years ago, even when dollar was not as bad, when Naira was not as bad as it is today. So those things are there. We just need to focus our attention beyond cost of living into a standard of living, which will put in all those other factors that Nigeria are concerned about and that will make them to dispute this kind of a report that, considering what I'm facing, how can these people be saying Nigeria has a low cost of living? But then, how low your cost is also dependent on how much you earn, your disposable income. What is low to a man who earns 100 may not be low to a man who earns 50.
Indeed, indeed. Now, what are the potential implications of this ranking for Nigeria? You know, could it impact foreign investment, migration patterns, or even social unrests? What exactly is the implication of this?
The implication could include the fact that, of course, foreign people, for example, when you look at Nigerian Stock Exchange, I was reading a report that said between October and December, the volume of money that portfolio investors brought into Nigeria's economy doubled. They brought it onto the exchange to come and make money anyway. You know, so if your currency is cheap, you should be able to make the best of it if you are producing. And as you continue to produce, then the currency will start to appreciate in value. Unfortunately, much of that has not happened. Our currency devaluation has not attracted foreigners or foreign investment into Nigeria as much as we would have loved to see. And until that happens, that is when we can begin to see the effect of coming to a low currency exchange place and helping to build the value of that currency by production of goods and services. But we're yet to see that manifest.
Very well, because of course Nigeria has been looking to get foreign investments for a while, at least since the beginning of this of this tenure, of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He has been seeking for this. Do you think this is a good time, to actually see all of this come to effect?
Well, there are still some other economic distortion here and there that we need to be able to deal with. So there are still some concerns for investors. There are still concerns around the stability of the currency. Although the currency is cheap, but the volatility is not comfortable. So it could be 1,200 today, by the next day, maybe 1,300 or 1,350 in the open market. So that level of volatility is not comforting. We need to be able to pilot the exchange rate to a level where it becomes more stable and someone can plan with it. So if I'm bringing, that's on one part. On the other part are things like security. Security issues in some part of Nigeria is not something to write home about. So although we are going out there asking people to come, those people we're asking to come are also reading the news. So when those news are out there, it doesn't encourage them to come. So things around uncertainties do not help foreign investment to come as much as we need to. So the government is aware of this distortion, and I believe they will start to move against them so that we can record more successes with foreign investment.
Very well. Nigeria has, of course, the Nigerian government has responded, officially to this ranking, so to speak. What policies or initiatives do you think should be put in place to address the underlying economic factors that influence the cost of living in Nigeria?
Okay, I think the cost of living in Nigeria could even be much better than it is today. So if we deal with certain things like inflation. And my approach, my recommendation to dealing with inflation is to look at critical drivers and see how we can bring down those critical drivers. A very important critical driver is food inflation. So even when inflation is, say, 28% plus, you will see food inflation being 30% plus, which shows that the food inflation is a critical driver of the composite inflation figure. So can we do something about food inflation? The analysis has been there forever. Government has made certain promises. I still remember the July speech of the president, where 500,000 hectares of additional land is to be cultivated. We have talked about how we're going to be able to, farm for 12 months and a year and all of those things. How much of those has happened or have happened as at now? We need to move away or move beyond the talk and begin to walk the talk. If we deal with that, food inflation alone, here is what will happen. The inflation, general composite inflation figure will go down. The so-called low cost of living will go even further lower. Disposable income of Nigerians will increase, which means they will be able to consume other items other than food, and we begin to have the multiplier effect of this in the economy. We also must fix security issues, because part of what I just discussed right now, it is arguable that part of the problem is insecurity in those plains where a lot of farming takes place. A very important place where farming takes place in Nigeria is Kaduna, as well as Plateau. These guys are huge farming states. But from time to time, there are these insecurity matters that disturb the farmers. They leave the farm, or they cannot harvest, or they cannot even plant sometimes. So whatever we need to do to continue to improve the security environment in those places will also help us tremendously as a country to begin to get the fruits of the work of the current administration.
All right. Now, can a consistently low cost of living, be sustainable in the long term? Are there potential drawbacks or hidden costs associated with this ranking?
Low cost of living is not sustainable. Just like a cheap currency, it's also not something that will continue to go on forever. Therefore, we have to be deliberate about what we are doing. It could be argued that low cost of living that we are enjoying right now is because the standard of living is also very low. So by the time we improve the standard of living, and people get electricity and they have to pay for it, and people get water and they have to pay for it, and the roads are there, and there are some of them are tolled and others, and we have to pay for it. People have healthcare and they have to pay for it. And by the time all those things are there, the low cost of living that we are speaking about today might not exactly be as low any longer. But for now, let's enjoy what we have, but we have to be careful of not dwelling on low cost of living, because the real place you want to be is on the appropriate standard of living, not cost of living.
Right. Now, while some, you've mentioned this earlier, because while some benefit from the lower living cost, others might struggle with poverty and limited access to essential services. How does this ranking reflect potential inequalities within the Nigerian society?
This report does not really capture that. A report that will have captured that would be a report that focuses on standard of living. But if you're just talking about cost, in fact, by the time you go into the deprived poor people's enclave, say in the suburbs or in the villages, their own cost of living is even much cheaper. But what is their standard of living? So you have a farmer who is there, the vegetables are behind him, he has yams in his barn. So he can feed, and he can say, oh, what is the cost of living? How much is rent in Usefari that I pay on a monthly basis? So my cost of living is very cheap. But the question is He has no access to education. People are still getting wheeled, pregnant women getting wheeled on wheelbarrow to the nearest healthcare center when there are complications. So healthcare, education, and some other infrastructure, sometimes to even get his goods out of the farm to the market is a problem. So while his cost of living is cheap, his standard of living is poor, in fact, very poor. So this report is not all embracing, which is why I've been saying we need a report that is more robust, that focuses on standard of living, which involves a lot more things than the cost of living.
All right. Now, a low, cost of living can sometimes indicate limited economic development. Now, what steps should Nigeria as a people take to ensure its growing economy doesn't compromise essential services and standards, of living for its citizens?
Well, the government has been making promises. I want to believe that the government is also conscious about some of these issues that are impeding the kind of standard of living that we would have loved to see. That is why, even right from the days of before election, the days of the manifesto, you can see what everybody was talking about as far as how to make the economy better. We're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about agriculture, we're talking about healthcare, about education. But the question will be how far we are progressing in each of these areas that we have listed. This is in the space of doing, and it is much more important than in the space of speaking about it. In my of statistics assessment, I think we are slower than we ought to be in several of these areas. However, that does not mean that the government is not aware of it or that it is not trying to do something about it, but we must continually tell the government that we think that you're slow about taking us to all those areas that you have made promises about, even right from the campaign times.
Okay, now, Gbolahan, let's hear your final thoughts before we move on to the next segment of the show.
Okay, on a final note, it's important to know that the report focusing on cost of living, using a common currency for all the countries that were assessed, that going by that, this particular report might actually be correct. However, we must move beyond focusing on cost of living. The right focus should be on the standard of living, which is more embracing and putting all the other factors that the cost of living has not taken into account. We can only wish Nigeria a great success at whatever we set out to do, especially now that we seem to be in a very challenging economic environment.
What do you think, about this, about the CBN not updated the official Forex website? What are your thoughts?
Okay, I don't want to guess the reason why CBN might have done that or have not done what it's supposed to. So let's assume maybe it was just an omission. So whoever is in charge is probably hearing what everybody is saying about not updating it, and we'll go right there and put an update in there, because people are watching not just within Nigeria, but also outside of Nigeria. And communication is very important as far as currency issues is concerned.
Indeed. We also noticed that in the parallel market, the dollar prices, keep increasing, by the day, which of course is due to the shortage of dollar in the Nigerian banks, basically. Now, how can this challenge be curbed?
Unfortunately, I don't think there's a microwave solution to the dollar problem. The dollar problem has been creeping in on us for years. In those periods of we were not paying attention because we had money, we squandered the money. Production of goods and services are very poor. If as a country, the only thing that we really offer to the world is crude oil, crude oil accounting for maybe like 90% of our foreign exchange earnings. And come to think of it, even the crude oil we're not producing in the right level of quantities. It is expected that we were going to get to this position someday, and here we are. Unfortunately, the long-term solution to this will involve Nigeria being able to produce goods and services that it can offer to the world and earn foreign exchange. That is what will assure a sustainably stable currency. Right now, the measures being put in place, in my assessment, are measures to keep us going. So we have a lot of obligations on the CBN windows that we must meet. So whatever we need to do to ensure that some of those obligations are being met and the country is kept afloat while we think through and are able to implement a more enduring policy and also wait it out. Like I started with, there is no microwave solution to dollar supply. You can't snap your fingers and get them. We must work at it.